Thank you very much, first of all, for this opportunity. And I wish I could be in Lithuania at the moment, because from today, actually from tomorrow, the lockdown for 3 weeks is starting in Jerusalem. So this is not a very good situation at the moment. So I will be speaking about the developing effective strategies for distance learning, which is especially very relevant at the moment for the current situation. So first, I will present a bit the global context, then we'll talk about effective strategies, mention as reference different UNESCO tools and guidelines, and cover teaching the 21st century skills in the end. So regarding the global context, I think many of you know that the global community, including Lithuania, agreed to achieve the quality and inclusive education goal, which is one of 17 sustainable development goals. And this education goal is divided into 7 education targets. Distance learning can actually help to achieve all of these targets, and especially also the last one, which is related to teaching the skills for sustainable development and global citizenship, which is a very important target and helps to achieve actually all sustainable development goals. However, the achievement and progress on education has been affected all around the world because of COVID-19, which recently happened. And the countries, including Lithuania, had to readjust their approaches. So UNESCO analyzed 14 national distance learning strategies and also reviewed 130 national distance learning platforms from around the world. And came up with a way forward and some recommendations by analyzing challenges and best practices. So the countries took immediate education response when the crisis happened and proposed different distance learning solutions. There had to be psychological support provided to students and immediate continuation of curriculum. And the next stage was home-based distance learning, which was kind of like a pilot stage because there was a new routine while everyone tried to adapt. So extracurricular learning was included, participation need to be ensured and continued, and also the quality of the interventions had to be ensured. So what do we do next? Will this be a new normal after the crisis? Do we need new teachers and a new way for the learners to learn? Do we need more open and resilient schools? Do we need new courses which would be adapted more for the future and new platforms? So it seems that based on this experience already, that the technology enhanced school systems are very much needed for the future. So for immediate education response, I mean, to go more in detail, some of the challenges that have been identified were that the national delivery systems, they were not adapted. There were not existing e-learning platforms that could be used immediately. TV and radio programs were being applied, but they were not effective and had to be changed. Also, there were electricity issues in some cases, connectivity challenges. Also, there were not enough digital devices, and the courses that were available for online learning, they didn't cover all the subjects, subject areas, and also were not accessible to all the learners. Also, the teachers were not able to design and facilitate distance learning. And there was a challenge also with the parents because they were not ready as well. So there were some good practices by some countries which managed to adapt quickly. For example, Italy addressed and provided solutions for students with special needs. In Lithuania, actually, this was also one of the countries analyzed. The Ministry of Education purchased and leased computers for students who didn't have them, which was one of the good practices. Also, free mobile data was provided in some countries. And regarding universal accessibility to curricular courses, there were also some good practices. Open education resources were provided. There was teaching in several languages. TV channels, for example, were teaching in New Zealand in several languages. And also home-based learning materials were provided. Actually, UNESCO has a global coalition on distance learning, and many private sector partners around the world joined forces and provided different type of e-learning resources. Like, for example, one of them is Global Digital Library, which the countries could use immediately. So the challenge with home-based learning was that there was not enough monitoring and evaluation readiness, not enough data. There was disengagement. Also, there was quite high dropout rate. Regarding pedagogical aspect, teachers were not ready to facilitate, and there were low literacy skills. So some of good practices for home-based learning were that France and Italy, for example, decentralized the schools. Also, there was centralized monitoring and mitigation in Italy. There were post-pandemic remedial resource courses provided, for example, in France. For pedagogical facilitation, more frequent formative assessments were provided, guidance to teachers. This was the case in Finland, and for parents in Armenia, free toll hotline in Arab Emirates, and supporting teachers' peer learning happened in Estonia. So there were quite a number of good practices. So this kind of test stage laid a foundation for long-term goals and a possibility to have long-term strategies on distance learning, e-learning, or information and communication technology in education. So for this, better technological readiness is needed. Also, appropriate assessments and distance learning courses developed. New teachers and new pedagogies are needed. And one important element to start, of course, there need to be quality ICT in education policies developed and appropriate financing mechanisms. So this leads all to more inclusive, crisis-resilient school systems in the long term. So this is an example of how implementation of the strategy, distance learning, ICT in education strategy could happen in practice. It's a new framework that UNESCO has developed. It's a bit of a busy slide, but an idea is that a very wide collaborative effort needs to happen by involving different stakeholders. And there are many different elements to be considered for the implementation of such a framework for technology-enhanced open school implementation. So this is actually under development and will be available for countries soon. So I will just briefly mention that UNESCO has a number of resources which can be used. It's merely for the reference, so I will go quickly through it, and the links are available. There is ICT in Education Policy Toolkit, which helps to develop long-term education policies, and more than 60 countries were supported. There is also ICT competency framework for teachers, the new version, which helps with them capacity development of teacher education institutions. Also, there are guidelines available on developing open education resource policies, guidance for how to mainstream artificial intelligence in education, and also mobile learning. So more on this in the next slides. So for artificial intelligence in education, the kind of overarching guidance and global policy was agreed upon in the Beijing Consensus on artificial intelligence. And UNESCO also developed the skills framework for K-12 students and guidance for policymakers how to mainstream artificial intelligence. There is also a portal for teaching artificial intelligence to students. This is newly developed with Ericsson, and the AI and Future of Learning, another initiative. Here are some resources on mobile learning, and there is a mobile learning week coming up this year. And actually, this is the first time it's available online. Usually, otherwise it's a huge event in Paris in UNESCO headquarters. Last year, the topic was artificial intelligence, and this year is on technology enable learning futures. And another project on mobile learning is there were 14 case studies on best practices in mobile learning developed. And I will mention one of them, Finland, which is more relevant to Lithuanian context. So in Finland, they transformed Finnish schools to mobile learning environments with a competence-based co-curriculum. So the new Finnish co-curriculum very much focused on transversal competencies and also how to mainstream ICT competence across different subjects. And this ICT and mobile learning served as very useful pedagogical tools and provided a good learning environment to achieve the curriculum goals and to improve the quality of education in Finland. So moving into the skills for the 21st century, or actually they could be called transversal competencies, soft skills. There are many terms for this. So why are they important? And this links back to the education target that I mentioned in the beginning, 4.7, which is actually to ensure skills for education for sustainable development and global citizenship around the world. So this, and mainstreaming transversal competencies helps to achieve all sustainable development goals. And they are required for the cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral development of students. They help to meet the changing labor market skill demands and risks. And also, they are very important for social and cultural development and lifelong learning, because we live in a knowledge society and we need to learn in a different way. So this is a framework on transversal competencies developed by UNESCO Regional Office in Bangkok, where actually I used to work before. And it defined that the key most important skills are these ones, and they are divided in 5 major blocks. So interpersonal skills, so this includes organizational skills, communication, intrapersonal, which is self-discipline and self-awareness, perseverance, media and information literacy. It's a very important skill, and UNESCO has a lot of guidance on that. There are many risks online for young people these days, and especially you know, some are even recruited into terrorism activities or, you know, commit suicides because of what's happening there. So it's important to teach them to recognize those risks online and to use ethically ICTs. Global citizenship is another block which includes tolerance and respect for diversity, which is often missing in education systems, but we are all living in a globalized world. And the final block is critical and innovative thinking. So this includes entrepreneurship skills, creativity, and so on. So to summarize, in the end, I mean, I'm going back to the previous slide. So this is the transition that could happen from this temporary solution for the home-based distance learning, and the country is trying to adapt to this new way of distance learning. Some that already had distance learning approaches and solutions before. Will this be a new normal? We should grab an opportunity and try to ensure comprehensive technology-enhanced school systems involving different partners and having quality platforms and ensuring the quality of many ingredients that I have mentioned earlier. So I think I covered all of the slides and my presentation is finished. We could proceed actually to the questions to give more time to ask audience some questions. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Lina, so much. A very interesting and a somewhat overwhelming presentation in terms of amount of data and amount of variables that are, presented as sort of relevant, important. So I'll ask a first question, given that I'm leading the discussion. But I'm curious, you presented many different practices and many different moving components that need to be taken care of. But, as you probably know, we have elections coming up in October. And, let's assume you are offered the position of the Minister of Education, and you accept it, and then the question is, what are you doing with all of this that with all the different practices around the world? What are your several key steps in the Lithuanian context that you would take in order to make a breakthrough in education in general and in the EdTech part of it specifically?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. So actually this is quite a loaded question, but I will be open and answer. So based actually on these successful practices that I presented and on all these elements I needed for the successful system, and actually based on the lessons learned in Lithuania with the distance learning, I think it's very important to develop the comprehensive ICT in education strategy. So as I mentioned, there are lots of guidance available and already experience which could be reflected there. And for effective implementation of the strategy, effective use of resources is very important. In one of the challenges in Lithuania is that there are challenges, it seems, with the distribution of resources, and there are, for example, some of the school buildings that are not closed but could be closed. So the kind of inclusive and effective distribution of the resources should be looked at. And a few other things are that for effective implementation of the strategy, it's important to focus on the well-functioning e-learning platform, to have good content for this platform, and to have well-trained teachers. Teachers who would be able to teach the right content for the 21st century, to teach those skills that I was talking about, and also that will have ICT competencies. And this needs to be reflected in the content and to have in a well-functioning e-learning platform. So did I answer your question?
In part, yes. Thank you. So following up on this, I saw in the our question and answer platform a question that came from earlier, but I wanted to follow up because you were saying that we need more teachers with ICT skills, and the question is, what will be the role of teacher considering tech is becoming more effective in teaching hard skills?
What will be the role of teachers teaching the hard skills?
considering tech is becoming more effective in teaching hard skills? Lina, could you reflect on the role of teacher, considering, you know, the development of technology in the future, from your point of view?
Yes. Well, actually, something that I didn't mention and what is very important, the distance learning won't be a solution for all the time in the future, because now many countries are, the students in many countries are studying online, but it has to be blended learning. I mean, the classroom practice is very important to teach the hard skills and to have the face-to-face interaction with the teachers. The social communication aspect will never be replaced. But distance learning can help for students to study individually and to do some interesting projects. And students like the technology and the interactive material online. So to have this kind of blended learning face-to-face and also online is the most effective way. And teachers need to become more the facilitators, not the transmitters of knowledge anymore, not like before.
Okay, Lina, where do you see business community in this, from your point of view? What is the role of business community in this sort of future model of education?
So when I was mentioning the e-learning platforms, this is actually where the business community can support to provide content on e-learning platforms. And there are many different e-learning platforms available, and some good practices regarding this in Lithuania. So the platforms that provide content, and also the platforms that train teachers. So actually it would be very useful to connect and to use these existing resources in teaching.
Okay, I have another question, but before I ask it, maybe somebody has a question here in the audience that would like to ask. Anybody? We are shy as Lithuanians usually, and you need to push 5 times and to look, you know, into, oh, there it is. There is a question. Yes. Please come up, say your name.
Hi, Lina. My question would be, how do you see Lithuania being a part of this global education transition, working together with UNESCO or partnering with other countries? Cheers.
Yes, so I think, you know, regarding UNESCO, I mean, in Lithuania, of course, it's always possible to invite the UNESCO experts, for example, from UNESCO headquarters that work on information and communication technology, if there is support needed with the strategy development. And regarding collaboration with other countries, I think there is ongoing collaboration with Estonia, Finland, the neighboring countries that have high education achievement and do well in global assessments. So these are the important countries to collaborate with and to learn from them. Not only go on visits there, but to actually really implement based on their experience in Lithuania, some of these best practices. Because those are the countries with a similar context in like Lithuania. For example, Singapore, that has a similar size to Lithuania, could also be a useful country to learn from, because they are very advanced in ICT in education and doing very well in academic achievement.
Thank you, Lina. I'll ask another question from the Slido platform, and it says, do you believe that STEAM is the future of high school?
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
Believe that STEAM, so science, technology, art,
arts.
and engineering is the future of high school?
Yes, partly it is, because actually to learn science, you also need to study arts. So besides getting into the subject area of science related subjects, it's important also to learn transversal competencies that would be mainstreamed across the different science subjects. So it's about the adapted STEM approach, actually.
A lot about soft skills. You talked about transversal skills. Where are discipline-specific skills? I mean, if we think about creativity, if we think about innovation, innovation doesn't happen in thin air, right? It happens somewhere. It has to be grounded in some sort of area, specific knowledge that pushes the barrier, further, pushes the frontier further. Isn't that true? Or how do you, where are these skills? What are the role of these specific discipline skills? Because so far from your presentation, I heard more about soft skills. Very quickly though.
Yeah, the thing is, what I also said earlier, that the subject, deep subject matter is very important as well, and the subject related skills. Transversal skills, there is more discussion about it because they are not integrated across subjects. So it's possible to teach subjects by having specific topics that would be cross-cutting across different subjects. Like, for example, creativity can be mainstreamed across, because in order to be future inventors, students need to be creative and also to be able to adapt. We don't know what the future professions are. So there needs to be flexibility and adaptability. But you can include it as a teacher in everyday teaching. It's just the teachers need to know how to do that and to be able to access already existing materials. And there are existing materials, even in Lithuania.
I think, the teachers might also need to be innovators, right? In some sense.
Yes.
Because, we often talk about creativity and all these magic words, but often, they somehow on a daily basis, you just sort of need to apply them in a much more routine way, rather than, just using these magic words that we like to use. Thank you, Lina, so much for your presentation and for your thoughts. And I give my microphone back to Ausra.